means to dance and spin like a top. To rejoice means to be so full of joy that it is just expressed in action. You cannot hold it in. It's just explosive. How much of your day is like that? Are we limiting our joy? Are we limiting our joy? He says, this wonderful, wonderful experience that Jesus has died to give to you, to pay for, this wonderful experience of knowing Jesus Christ, that is what, when you're living in it to its fullness, because he says you can live with fullness of joy. When you live to the fullness of joy, you are like a bubbling brook that is just literally gushing out and just celebrating on everybody. All those little children that you deal with and say, oh, we got loud there, sorry. So all of the things and all the people, your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, your people that live beside you, people that you meet as you're walking down the street, the people that you have conversations with, the people that you address even when you're by yourself in the car and you're going, you're so stupid, why'd you cut me off? Every single thing that we interact is an interaction of either joy or suffering. It's only those two things. Joy, abundant, excited, or suffering. Or we try to live in a world where we try really hard to deny the suffering and push down our joy and just be religious. You know, just carry the book and say, everything's fine, everything's good, I'm good, I'm strong, I'm in God, God's doing a work in me, I'm doing it, I'm making it. But boy, am I a miserable person on the inside. I'm just not at peace. And even Paul says, I'm still struggling to find this joy where you're just living it, expressing it in everything you do. Because you just become so aware of who God is, that it just literally consumes you and your life. Paul says this is available. This is available. Do you want it? Beloved, do you want it? I don't mind repeating what I've written to you because it really protects you. This joy that he's talking about is protection for you. It keeps you well. Literally, physically. It keeps you sharp mentally. It keeps you thinking clearly. It keeps you serving with love and true progress in people, because you are progressing and that flows out into people's lives. So he says, I've written to you this, beware. Now this is where the big thing is, beware the religious hypocrites that are trying to take Jesus, this joy, this abundant life, this rejoicing that he's given us because of the work that he's completed in us, and they're wanting to add something to that pulls it down, the joy down. What is it? Well, it's a lot of things, but here's the joy of Jesus that we're serving, and he's so wonderful. He's so excited, and he has so much riches for our life. And so we're holding on to this with all of our might. But we have these senses that we have. See, this holding on is an internal holding on. This is something deep inside of me that recognizes the only thing in life that's important that I can get to understand is who God is and who he's made me to be. There's nothing else that's important. So now Paul's going to tell us how to get this rich, abundant, exciting life. How do you get it? Well, it's a transfer. It's a transfer. It's an atonement. That Christ took our suffering on the cross. He removed it from us. It says he literally became sin for us. So everything, and sin is suffering. Sin is suffering that you do to yourself and you do to others. Sin is not a list of do's and don'ts. Sin is how we mistreat ourselves and others. Because God has said, it's simple. simple. It is, and Paul says it, and then Jesus says it again on the Sermon on the Mount. He said it's simple. The whole entire Word of God encompasses two principles, and that is to love the Lord your God unrestrained. That's the first one. To love God unrestrained. What does that look like? Well, in your life, it looks different than mine, but I'm telling you, each one of us is on the path, and God is taking us on the path of being unrestrained with Him, because that's going to be eternity. Eternity is totally unrestrained relationship of joy and pleasure with Jesus. So, how do we get it wrong? Well, in the garden, we talked about this a lot. In the garden, we made this transfer of being this giving being, this giving creation, this giving person that God made to give love and accept love, and it's this giving and receiving, this reciprocal relationship. And then God takes that, and He brought in another person in the garden, and He allowed a reciprocal love relationship of joy like this. Here, not only horizontal, but vertical and horizontal both. And so basically what we're looking at, guys, is that it was a relationship where we were created to give. When we fell and took on the darkness of not choosing God or choosing good, but choosing ourselves and our darkness and ourselves, we became creatures of self, no longer to give, but to get. Now I am a creature who has totally lost the concept of the joy of the Lord of giving and receiving with God, and that joy of giving and receiving. Now I'm a get. I want. It's me. What do I need? We become receivers instead of givers. And in that quest to get more and more and more, which is that darkness that drives us down deep inside of wanting more, wanting better, wanting the next, wanting our everything to be. We want everything to be perfect. And that's not reality. It's not. The only thing perfect is the joy of the Lord and the Christ relationship that He has afforded to us through His own sacrifice of giving. He says, you die with me. How do you die with Christ? You become a giver of yourself. You no longer own you. What you said, Sandra, you no longer have rights. You no longer have needs. You no longer have empty places in you. Paul says, your heart has been circumcised, which means He has He's taken out the flesh, the things that are the give me's, and He's replaced that with the joy of giving. And when you have your granddaughter or your grandchild, Donna, and you set that 3 hours aside, you have changed from a getting person of what I can get, who can take care of me, who can watch over me, who can love me, and you turn all that attention on that child. For 3 hours, you're giving and giving and giving. And that child is responding in a way of perfect behavior? No. But in love, you're connecting relationally with that child. And as a grandmother, you are pouring love and light into that light, so that at some point that child will recognize light. That's love. I want that. Because you're giving, you're not receiving. When you give to your spouse, you're giving. When you give to a person in need that has no coat, and you take your coat off and give it, that brings joy. Sitting there looking at the person and saying, gosh, their life is messed up. They need what I have. Then let me tell you something. You've not helped them because all they see is you have your life together and I don't. And that's a lie because you don't have your life together. None of us do. Only Christ will be victorious when we get our lives together. And you know when that's going to happen? When I step into heaven.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a good one.
When I step into his fullness of his presence, when I'm not seeing him through a glass darkly anymore, but I see him face to face, then I will understand and I will have, oh, I can't even imagine. Can you imagine if we're supposed to have joy and we're giving and giving and giving and rejoicing and, oh my goodness, when that little girl, Melody Joy sings this last song and she is just enraptured with who God is. That is what he offers us. And he offers that for us to make it available to each other. But here's what happens. Okay. Judy, I'm going to tell you how good God is. He is so precious. He accepts you with no exceptions. He loves you so much that when you say, Judy, I want to be yours, he takes that as your word. He comes and floods in you. He brings with you joy. He brings with you rejoicing. He brings with you peace. He brings with you contentment, satisfaction, calmness. And you're like, well, okay, those are gifts I have, and okay, God's given. I can trust that he's given them, but I'm waiting. Okay, when are they going to kick in though? Nothing. Why? Why? Because when I cloud my mind up with anything that is dark, anything, a thought, a movie, a book, a comic on TV, a news report that's critical and ugly and argumentative and stirring up more and more distrust and hate. And I fill my mind with those things. It only fills me again with that suffering of, I want them to stop acting like that. I want them to find Jesus and get some peace. I want the world to behave. The world is hurting. The world is suffering. And we are to have joy that is so abundant and full that when we walk into a place where there's hurting, we should bring healing. We should bring peace. We should bring joy and comfort. But here's what we need to figure out, and this is the part that took me 63 years to figure out. And Paul says it, and then Jesus says it again Jesus said it first before Paul, but Jesus says it in on the Mount sermon. It is because we are so busy judging what everybody else should be doing that we cannot find our own joy in the soup. We make ourselves miserable and we bring our own suffering, which is sin, when we dwell and live in the past hurts, or when and the regret and the pain of past mistakes, ours and others, past pains, when we live in that suffering mentally, we force out the joy of the Lord. We are the ones who embrace the suffering. Now, I'm going to tell you, we've had a lot of suffering in our life over this last year. Have you? There's been a lot of suffering. We've lost Tom. We've lost Aunt Linda. We've lost Joan at church. We've lost Robert at church. Sandy's sick. I'm struggling with my health. None of us are getting any younger. Aches and pains. Whoop. Hair's gray. Eyesight's going bad. Cannot make it to the bathroom half the time. I'm talking about my warranty's running out, guys. How about yours? It's part of life. The living and the dying. We were created to be infinite beings. We chose to become finite. And in that finite brings suffering. It is what it is. You can't stop the people around you from sinning, and that's going to cause suffering. You cannot help that you make mistakes, and that causes suffering. But Jesus says, I am the remedy to your suffering. I am your joy. So how do we find joy? Well, here's how we find joy. And I started this last week with talking about my grandson. When I look at you, Sandra, as a child of joy, as a child filled with the love of God, I am to find Jesus in you. I'm to look for light in your eyes, in your face, in your actions, in your choices, in the essence of who you are in your life, in the package of who you are. In your package. Sandra's been through a lot of hurt. She's lost her husband. She's raising kids by herself. Teenagers, all of them. And yet, the Lord says, she's mine. The whole package. Faults and all. The days that she totally loses perspective with her kids. The day she totally wants to just run away and pull her hair out. Every single moment, God is her joy. So how do we release those things that cause us pain? Because they do. When we pull them in here and hold them tight, the things like the loss of a grandson. I mean, we have a sweet lady in here that her grandson just stopped to fix the truck and fix the stuff he had in the back of the truck. And someone killed him on the road. He just was hit, sitting in a parking lot. Devastating things happen in the world around us because the world is functioning on a selfish road that is headed to destruction. We are destroying humanity. Humanity is destroying humanity. God is not destroying humanity. Man is destroying it. And we get caught up in the suffering of that destruction. The world's trying to kill your kids, Sandra. They want to destroy the kids and make them suffer. Shoot each other. Kill each other on video, in their music. Turn on the human, kill the human, oppress the human, and we turn on each other with such violence and hate because you are causing me pain. See, I don't pay much attention when my sin is causing you suffering, but when your sin is causing me suffering, that's another story. I don't want that. And God says, but this is a pattern that is a cycle of you're getting hurt, they're getting hurt, you're getting hurt, they're getting hurt. And you turn into this entanglement of misery where you become, Paul says, enemies of the cross, enemies to each other. How does that happen? How does that happen? Well, because we limit and put God in too small of a box. We want to say, God fits into my understanding. And my understanding is he's working on me, and I'm improving. It's a progress, right? That progress of always getting there. So he's working on me, and I'm getting better. Be patient. God's not done with me yet. And yet, am I patient with the work that God is doing in you? That may be at a different pace than me. Maybe you're way ahead of me on some things and behind in some others. We're not on the same place. Never are. Never will be. But the fact is that where I am, I cannot look at you and say, you're doing it wrong. You know, I heard this lady talking to a young man, to a young mother. It was a young mother, and the mother was so upset because her children would not give 100% in their homework. And she wanted 100% of that homework turned in, and she wanted it corrected. And their home had turned into a war zone over 20% of homework, because basically what the woman said to her, how much homework did they do? Well, they do 80%. Okay, so you want her to do 100%. And she said, yes, 100% is what it is expected. 100%. And the lady said, well, is that absolutely true? That they can give 100%? Do you believe that they could do 100%? Yes, I believe that. Do you give 100% on everything that you do? I just went in my kitchen the other day, and I decided that I was going to clean it of every speck of dirt in it. I mean, I just get with that. I wanted it scrubbed from top to bottom. You know, every little tiny crease, I wanted to get that little toothbrush. And I mean, I worked. Have you ever done that? Felt like you just had to do that, you know? And I just worked it. I turned on music, and I was worshiping the Lord, and I was having such a good time. And I was just scrubbing. I scrubbed that coffee pot inside. I took it apart, and I scrubbed. I mean, I just went, and I said, Lord, I'm going to be clean like this. You know, got my little toothbrush and a rag, man. I want you to clean me up like this. Just scrub me up. Because I'm just enjoying scrubbing this. And the Lord said to me, I do enjoy scrubbing you up. I'm doing it all the time. The Lord is literally all the time, because He's committed. He's in this. He's going to get it done. Well, I got really tired. My kitchen's little, and I see my kitchen's little. I cleaned one little section. It was like 3 drawers, the wall, the top, and the counter, and the cupboard above it, which was all of our medicines. Spotless, beautiful, perfect. I'm like, oh, I want my whole life to be just like this. Just like this. And I thought, it took me all day. Well, okay, I'll start again tomorrow, and I'll do the next part. And each day I'll do one section, and I'll clean until my whole kitchen is just spotless, like this one little spot. Well, I can get to it for a few days. I can get to it for another few days. I can get to it for, and then, everything up is, and all of a sudden I came back and I was like, that looks just like the rest of the kitchen now. It just was dirty again. There's not any way, unless you're constantly over there with the toothbrush going, it's not going to stay perfect. Because there's no perfect in the earth. The world is not perfect. It's decaying. It's everything that's made will disintegrate. It's temporary. Everything on earth, temporary. Because in the fall of the garden, everything that went from being eternal fell to be temporary. So God says, nothing that's temporary is going to bring you joy. Nothing. The only things that will bring you joy is the permanent, the eternal, the forever. And that's God. God is in the Jewish literature called infinity. You cannot define his vastness, who he is. That entirety of who God is in me. It's in me. And the Lord says, it's all there. It's nothing to be added. Nothing more to be, nothing to be added. It's all there. Jesus covers all of it. And when he was placed in us, he circumcised our hearts, and he became the action, the energy, the moving part of us that's the reality of who I am. I am the bride of Christ. I am his woman. He's created to me to be his companion in whatever capacity eternally that looks like. Forever. That's in me. And so he says, because if I can grasp that, I don't know what time it is, but let's see. If I can grasp that eternal, and I can begin to realize that that is in me, then I don't want this anymore in the world. I'm no longer looking to get. I'm no longer out there searching. Now, my get has turned its attention to get, until this is the joy. And the next thing I know, I'm dancing in the rain. I'm living life with death all around me. I'm living victory because the earth, the dying things can take Sandy's body, but they can't take Sandy. This earth cannot take us because we are taken already. We are claimed and we are bought with a price. And so my children don't have to please me. Oh gosh, that's really hard. They had to please me when they were children. But when they become adults, I have to get them in the frame of mind that says, they are God's. They're not mine. And he will finish the work in them. I'm to love them through their growth. And that's all it is. It's growth. They're splitting up, husband or wife. I don't like it. It's not my choice. My heart says it's probably not God's choice. But the fact is God already counted in that choice would be made, and that he would work them through the process. You have a child that's in rebellion and fighting you with everything they have. Release them to the Lord and say, honey, you're not fighting me. You don't have to change. Because I expect no change in you at all. Because I can't change you. When I try, I will mess you up. Because I'm messed up. So when you are talking to your children, your grandchildren, your friend, anyone that you react to, relate to, you are not there to make them a better person. You are there to show them how God makes a better person. Because you become a better person. And then they see your example. Be a giver. Give, and give. Don't, even in criticism, don't take. Because even when we're criticizing, we take away. We take away their hope. We take away their joy. We take away from them instead of giving for ourselves. And what we do is we actually bring their suffering right in on us and into our lives. So you want joy, you want to live abundant, then you give. You don't take. And And it means that for the whole world. So this is the way I have really expressed the last few months living joy. God in the Old Testament required 10%. It was a training. It wasn't required because God needed it. It was training for them to learn how to give. Okay? Giving to God is only training to learn how to not get, but to give. And so God says, give me a tenth and I'll take care of the rest. And they did that really religiously. And so we've gone into the new age of church and we're like, well, tithe is no longer a law. But Jesus said, you give till it hurts. You have 2 coats, you give 1. If something's cold, you give your other one. If something hits you, you turn your cheek. Fact is that we take no offense. That's what he's saying. You go out to life and into the world, you take no offense at the world. You just serve them. Everything is service. And so, how does that continue in our lives? Well, Paul says as you continue that, he doesn't attain it yet. He says, I'm not quite there, but I see what I'm supposed to be doing. And that is that I'm supposed to be encouraging, lifting up, giving, and giving out, and not taking in. Paul says, I'm not there, but I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it's that inventory again of, am I living in joy? Or am I suffering? If you're suffering, what are you suffering about? Pinpoint it. Get to the bottom of it. Find out why you're suffering. Don't just suffer and go, well, it's because my kids are bad today, or it's because my friend just cussed me out. And it's circumstances should not matter anymore. It doesn't matter what anybody says or does to you, because your response is no longer reciprocating with suffering, but now you're going to reciprocate with joy. And you respond in joy. And when we do that, that joy just keeps abundantly flowing and overflowing in our life. Does that make sense? Okay. So Paul's asking us to live in joy, he said, my degree was the do's and don'ts. My degree was pretty prestigious about how to do all the do's and don'ts. But now Paul's saying it's not about do's and don'ts anymore. Now it's about harmony. It's about harmony of living in the kingdom, a new kingdom, a kingdom of God, where we no longer have the rules of the kingdom of this world of hate and despising and torturing another and fighting over things and trying to take away from each other and making each other miserable. Now we are in a kingdom of joy. That's why when Jesus said, you want to be in this kingdom? Go back today. Go back, and if you can find the Passion interpretation on your phone, go back and read the Sermon on the Mount in the Passion. And you'll see, Jesus says, these are the things that make you happy. When you're no longer looking out for you, but you are now looking out for others and the interests of God in their life. It's a tough transition, guys, because I don't know who said it before, but it's a constant thing of being in your head and saying, that was negative. Okay, why did I just say? And I'm talking about everything. And we do it over everything. I'm talking about, you get a phone call. And the person calls and says, well, I just lost my job. And you say, what happened? Well, I've been late too many times. And you want to say, punctuality. Do you not understand? And you want to preach a sermon. If you're an adult in this world, then you got to be out there, and you got to be responsible, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And we start telling them, we're tutoring them on how to keep a job. Well, do we know the whole circumstances?
No.
No. Do we know why they didn't miss work? Or why they missed? No. What if they're just lazy and they don't want to work? None of them knows that. They'll deal with the consequences. They'll figure it out. Consequences teach us. You don't work, you get hungry. I can't rescue you. Or my I'm here, I love you. Come see me, I'll do anything I can. But, you know, this is kind of gotta work its way out. You gotta just go through the process. It'll be okay, God's got you. But the fact is, we wanna fix them. Well, if we hadn't done this, well, you can't go in the past and say what they couldn't have done or didn't do, because the past is dead. And that's where we have to come as Christians, and that's what Paul's saying. And I'll close with this. He is saying to you, stop living in the past. I lost my job. That's the past. I had an affair. That's the past. I'm lonely. That's now. Let's figure out how to do that. I'm suffering. I'm hurting. Talk to me about what's in your heart and in your mind. I want to know why you're suffering. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of it and get the suffering out. It's not a list of rules, ladies. It's not a Paul saying, if you don't sin, you won't be miserable. It's not that simple, because we're going to make mistakes. It is recognizing when you have moved from light to darkness, recognizing it and going, oops, don't need to be here, and moving back into light. Without condemnation. Without, I blew it with my kids. I'm a terrible Christian. That's not productive. The productive thing is, get back in light. Right? Move back to light. And I'm not preaching to anybody but myself, because this has been my marriage experience. My marriage experience over the last year has been just a funny example this morning. The dog went into the bathroom, my precious little dog, and pulled out a piece of floss and carries it into the living room. And he's got it in the middle of the floor, chewing on it. And of course, I am like, that's so gross, you know, and freaking out. But the fact is, it's a piece of floss. It's not anything. And there's times, and so what is the response? You stupid dog. What are you bringing this out here? The dog doesn't have a clue. He smelled my spit on a piece of floss, and he liked it. He's a doggy. And I can't judge my doggy to think like I do, because he's a doggy. You know what I'm saying? So he's going to go in there and get his little piece of floss and drag it in the living room, and he's going to have accidents, and he's going to do dumb things, because he's a doggy. You know? I love him. I love him. I'm not going to smack him and beat him because he pulled a piece of floss out into the living room. It's a piece of floss. I'm going to pick the piece of floss up, put it in the trash, and go, that's part of having a dog. Is it not? Well, it's part of having kids. It's part of being married. It's part of, they're going to do things, and there's going to be things that you go, ooh, and you have to go, it's just a piece of floss. It's just a thought, a thing. It's temporary. It's not eternal. Paul's saying, stop looking behind, put your hope in Jesus, and live in present joy by recognizing that there's a lot of things going on around you that doesn't matter. What matters is how you respond to them. And it's that simple. We can respond with joy, we can respond with light, or we can respond with darkness and with suffering, which means we are compounding the world's suffering, because it's all joint and very convoluted. Our suffering is just as much a part of the problem in this world as the lost soul, because we're not sharing joy and being the remedy. If we're sharing darkness and criticism, we are part of the darkness. That's tough love, but it's true. So, be light and be joy, because it is the only way to glorify God in our lives. It's the only way. He said, don't put your light under-emotional, of criticism. Don't put your light in a hidden place because of your darkness. Take your own darkness out of the way and let the light shine like a light on the hill that says, come and see. He's so good. He's so good. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we just thank you that in your word, God, you have just expressed such a love to us. And you make it simple, we make it complicated. And you're the one that is so brilliant. You're the creator. You have a plan that is so infinitely detailed that we only have a small, little, tiny glimpse. And yet we become so fixated on trying to make it work out our way of thinking. So just take our preconceived ideas, our expectations, our thoughts, not only about other people, but about our own selves, and recognize that we are